Hickey here at Hickey's Custom Resto. Not everyone will be familiar with this particular type of car. What a beautiful dash. Anyway, this is a 1955 Pontiac. And if it looks a little short and a little weird, it's because up here in Canada, we had the 55 Canadian Pontiac. And from what I'm told, the difference was in Canada, we made the 55 Pontiac off of the 55 Chevy, what's known as the short shoebox platform, the shortest of the Tri-5s. So if you guys want to look into that and correct that or whatever, comment, feel free. I'm just reiterating what I was told. But this is basically a 55 Chevy with a little bit of Pontiac stuff on it, so all 55 Chevy powertrain, all that lovely stuff. And they do this with the back fenders, which they basically got that off of the regular Pontiacs. But from what I'm told, if you have an American 55 Pontiac, the car is quite a bit longer. If any of you have an American 55 Pontiac, and I'm sure there's a couple models or whatever, please give me a link to a video or whatever. I might have to do a bit of research and just go look at them. But, if anyone has any information on all this, that'd be really cool. But all I do know, the guy that owns this, he was like 14 years old in 73, 74. His neighbor had restored this car, and he wanted to buy it, so he did. When he bought the car, it had this lovely metallic dark blue on some of it, and then the top and whatever section of the car was this blue here. He redid it to that blue on the door to match the dash. I originally saw this car, I believe it was in the early to mid 2000s, and it was beautiful. It was that color through and through, and all the chrome, all the trims were super nice. It was all original except for chrome craggers. And I think he had a 350 with the chrome valve covers and air breather, your car parts store special stuff. So now, and this car's been kind of repainted and redone in a few iterations. But what the owner always wanted to do, and a lot of friends and family, he was telling me, they all have muscle cars and whatnot too, and you got to keep them original. You got to keep them a certain way, a certain trend, right? But he always wanted kind of what has become known as the resto mod, even in the 90s, So what we have here is a nice set of wheels, drilled rotors and discs. So there's a disc conversion on the car with a proportioning valve. The back is still drums. I don't know what they're out of, but I know the rear end was upgraded. He has good brakes in it. Somewhere between the 420 and 440 horsepower, 350 small block, 4-bolt. It's an older block, but it's been built. Nice copper-colored paint on there and chrome headers. Anyway, good rad. Now, when you drive this car, you always hear about people say the Tri-5 cars in the early 50s Chevys drive like a dream down the road. I've got to say, I don't know what he's done to the suspension, but this car drives like a dream. You so much as pull out of the driveway to go to I have 2 driveways. And if I pull in and out and park the car up top in my old shop, man, this thing... Now, there's no power steering in this, and it still drives like a dream. These cars are light, and as a reference to that, I wonder if I just put my hand right here. Look at that. We can just roll that all over the shop. I don't start this car to move it within the shop. I literally just roll it. Meaning the tires aren't rock hard full of air. There's a little bit of a bulge there. But this thing rolls nice. What a nice car. So basically, he finally decided to do what he wanted. It was a 3-speed on the column car originally. Then he had a 3-speed on the floor. Now it's got the 4-speed Saginaw in it. He put some other rear end in it. I'm not sure what he did there. I'm not really a mechanic, and I deal with so many cars, I can't remember everything. So after he bought the car, this quarter had gone bad somewhere up in the top. It had been rubbed before and fixed, and I guess it was blistering out. So that's where you see this whole patch welded in. And it's interesting what you can find. So I'm going to grab a bench here, and we'll have a look at some of the stuff you might find. Now, sometimes when you tear apart these older body jobs and restorations from the 70s and 80s, even the 90s, you find a lot of rot and a lot of rust. But the cool thing with this car so far, so you can see here, where that was all what they call brazing, I guess. They use like the brass rods and torches, and I mean, it's actually really well done up here. Like, it's, whatever filler you put there, it's not gonna go to shit on you. Like, it's very thin. Of course, then when you get to here, gosh, hey, that almost looks like copper. Maybe it's just something that happens to the brass when, I don't know. I've never torch welded, to be honest. I guess I'm not quite that old. But right here, it almost looks as though it was welded with a coat hanger. Could just be some goop on there, whatever. So we did have, down here, the car had a little rub, and there was a crack in the filler, and the crack come up like so, and you can see where some moisture put a bit of rust here, a little bit right here. But all this, now that brown you're seeing, check this out. That's the, I believe, the resin out of the filler. So what happens is, hard to film this, but it basically just scrapes off, and you've got super clean metal underneath. So when we sand that off, that's all clean metal with the exception of right there and right there. Even all the way up here, everything is cool. Then the panel they put in is torch welded down here. And then they must have moved the weld inside because you don't see it anymore. And then you get down here and it sort of reappears. But comes across here. Now this is a little bit shoddy, but you know, you couldn't get panels back in the day. This is what they did. They remade this corner here. It was probably all chewed out on the edge. And then they just wrapped it over. And if you look at these little dots, you see them? And if you look at this panel here, you can see little black dots, or little spots of filler covering the black dots. I think what they had was a spot welder that put a sharp pointed hot spot in it. And it goes like that all the way across. Actually, we'll come back here. So, because you couldn't get a 55 Canadian Pontiac quarter panel, they actually cut that out of a 55 Chevy and welded it in, but they created this bottom piece because they wanted to put, instead of your wheel arc coming up wherever it goes, must have been up here somewhere, they created this piece to put that Pontiac line back in. And I guess they could only make it so big, that whole bottom, it stopped here, and they had to make another piece to go the rest of the way. And there you have those little dots, right? Which I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe somebody recognizes that kind of stuff. I believe it's like a spot weld with a very sharp point, unless you had a point that you could do something with a torch. But it's so nice and straight, it's not overheated, and it's not coming undone or rusting, so it must have been in good shape like when they did it. Like, it's tight. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But it's funny how you can torch weld this. Like, I mean, you could almost put 3 fat coats of a high build on this and block it smooth. That's how good it is. But when you're going up and down and in the side of the car, it's rude and crude. And then at the bottom, I guess it's to avoid heat, maybe, they spot welded it. So it's funny what you find. Now, what the owner thought we were going to find, because we knew about the crack in the filler back here where it had been hit, he was worried that we were going to find a bunch of rot. Now, I haven't stripped down here yet. We're going to strip those right off. I think they're going to be okay, to be honest. because as long as he's owned this car, other than high school for like one season, this thing had never seen a winter. And then after he redid it and redid it again, it never saw winter. Now, every time this car had been refreshed or restored or quote unquote whatever they did to it, right? They kind of just fixed what they had to, took some paint off, repainted the car. So there's not like 50 layers. I mean, on the door, under this blue, there's primer, and then there's this blue. And that's pretty much it. Now this flat black you're seeing up here and right there, you can see it on the hood. He basically, he always wanted like a black menacing hot rod. So he took a bunch of spray bombs, satin black, flat black, and some semi-gloss. And he did one side of the car in semi-gloss, and then he did the top in flat black. And then I think most of this side he did it in satin or something. But it was 3 different blacks, and he wanted to decide what he liked with a handful of spray bombs. And you can see it still around the lights back there. And he wanted to, anyway, he really liked that it wasn't all the way flat, but not quite semi-gloss. So we're gonna use a black on this car, the whole car, and it's gonna be set up to a satin. Basically, what I'm gonna do, I have a couple videos about a year or so ago where I did not a Scamp, what are they called? Dodge Dart Swinger with a 340. So I did the black hood with the black bumblebee stripe around it. We did that with a specific paint. You put 2 nice coats on, goes on all kind of lumpy, and then it kind of sucks down flat into the car, and it creates what looks like a satin black decal. But the cool thing is it's washable, and it's pretty tough stuff. So we're going to paint the whole car with that, which is going to be fun because he saw that car and he's like, that's the black I want. Which gives you like a sheen, but there's no reflection or shine. So you can wash it. Or see this flat black, like look, he got that in the dust. Now it kind of wipes away, but you can see little spots. Like there's no fixing that. You can't buff it because it's flat. It's like trying to clean an emery cloth, right? Or wet sandpaper. So we're going to do it so that the car can be cleaned. It's what he wants. He lowered the car, put cool wheels on it. It drives well. He had to do a lot of crazy exhaust work to kind of heat stuff and move it up off the headers so that you weren't dragging bottom. But I mean, he did it right. There's plenty of clearance. You know, I wouldn't say go off-roading with this thing, but on any public road, this car is totally fine. So what we're going to do, we've got the grill piece that goes in. It's in the trunk. I can show you that after. We're going to leave these 2 pieces chrome. There's 2 chrome bands that go there and there, and there's lines in them. All the holes in the middle, I don't know if it had the plane or some kind of chief. All these little holes here, going to weld them all shut, make it smooth. So we're going to keep some of the trims, and we're going to eliminate all the extra badging and stuff. We're going to give it a nice, fresh, clean look. We are going to keep the nickel band that runs down here. You can see how it comes down and shoots all the way back like a spear. So that'll be the only chrome on the side of the car, plus the mirrors and the wheels, of course. These are the wheels he's going to run. I wish he would have put old ones on to bring it to my shop because, yeah, I'm afraid of getting stuff on them, but we'll be careful. But all these holes in the trunk lid, that's all going to be welded shut. We're just going to have these 2 things that match the things in the hood. Apparently it's weird to get the light covers for these, so I pulled them off and threw them in the trunk right away. 90% of the lead fell out of down there, which is the only lead I found on the car so far. So I'm not sure what we're going to do with that. Probably bring it outside, sandblast it out. Well, we'll probably torch heat it just to make sure we can drip out anything that might be left. Then we'll sandblast it, and I'm actually going to pinch that tight and weld it together. You can see some crude bodywork down here. We're just going to take the grinder and spin that all out and basically redo it, unless any of the metal's bad. Same with that one. This one is still nice and tight. We'll sandblast out those rusty spots. The rest of it we should be able to sand off and swirl. It'll be good. We think what happened, and this is why the car needed to be redone. I mean, the blue faded and it was looking rough. So then he threw a bunch of black on it. And he was kind of working on the car for a few years. What was happening where all the welding was, all the brass, you know, the bronzing, blazing, brazing, whatever you want to call it. Look at that, eh? To me, that looks like copper. And then you've got this green stuff. Now, my old man, who's quite old, said he believes that there was flux left on here. So what had happened? I wonder if we might have pulled it all out already. But what was happening, within an inch to 2 inches wide, all the way around where these welds were, there was crackling going on in the finish. And at first we thought we'll take the black paint off and see the blue paint. So what we did, now some of the black paints were good, like the hood, we had to sand the hell out of it. But on the side of the car, you can see where there's a little bit of sanding and then nothing. Well, that's because I took some thinner, the stuff I use is gun wash, and I washed the black paint off the car with some shop towels. And you know, you wear gloves, right? Don't put too much of that stuff through your skin, is what I'm saying. But anyway, that's what was happening with the car. Here's an example. See all that weird crackling? And then you can see round dots. Well, that's little swollen patches in the filler where the filler's giving way. Now, you could take this car in, get it dipped or wet blasted, whatever, dustless, sand blasted, take all the stuff out of it and redo it. We don't have that budget on this car. Now, if you look down here, you can see a patch panel. So we're going to come up to where the filler starts and it disappears up here. We're just going to basically pull all that filler off, everything below that belt line. It wasn't really failing, but you can see all the little circles, right? The little donut looking things in there. So what happens when the filler is detaching, and where it's detaching, my old man figures it's the flux was left on some of the welds. Maybe the acid ate into the filler. Maybe it's a reaction with the bronze, the brass, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, people say, oh, they did bad work back in the day, like right here. I think there's some kind of weird patch right here. You can literally see this shape and those little dots, right? And then that whole bottom of the door had been skinned. We're going to have to grind all that off. But you can tell when you come up to these, and this is a good sign if you're out looking at a car and the trim is off, you're kind of in luck, right? Look, no filler, no filler, no filler. Come back here, no filler. Oh, filler. You know this whole front piece was filled. You come back here, they're all bare metal. A little bit of pink putty, must have been a bit of a dent here, and there was. And then from there down, plenty of filler. Someone redid that, and it sticks way out. We're going to cut that right off and make a new one. I don't even care about the filler on that. We're just cutting that one off because it was made wrong. But once you get all the filler out, when you come up to see this top edge here, you can see where we sanded the black paint off this side, but it's not all crackled. It's not all messed up. Did I leave any on here? Probably not. So this had a patch put in like so. Look at that. It's like a big, looks like they welded a Glock into the fender there, but, and it could have been plastic too, because it all failed. But again, this was all, there was like a high spot. And this was, see the dark spot in the metal here? That had popped up, and up here as well. So a lot of filler, and it was all banged down, torch welded in. But when you get to here, there's like no filler, almost no filler. Like that's your normal sort of deal. All the filler here was soft and failing. Once you get to here, you can't scrape it off with a razor blade. It's that hard, and it's stuck. So sometimes you find stuff like this under a car. You figure, oh no, look at all the stuff I got to fix. But I'll tell you what, if this is what you're finding under your car, I think you're lucky, because so far nothing is rotten or pitted. The metal is good. Now, the reason for a lot of this filler, you can't see it on camera, but this patch here, it's bulbed up. So we're actually going to split this, knock it in, hammer and dolly it a little bit, make it a little flatter, you know, so we'll have a normal amount of filler and not like the 1/4 inch that was on there. And that's going to fix right up fine. The other thing we're going to do when we sand it and cut it all up for the filler to stick, I'm going to throw epoxy primer on it so that we have something between the filler and the brass, because I don't know if that's what reacted to it, but that's what we're going to do. Someone welded on plates under here. There's 2 levels here. Not sure what we're going to do there yet. A little bit down here. Same with this on the front. You can see where they just they really overused the Bondo when they didn't have to, but we'll sandblast all that out, straighten it out a bit, a few cuts if we have to, and, you know, minimal filler will go back. Then on this side, they did the same thing without coming down the side. You almost wonder if they had something on the fender attached and it rotted over there, a mirror or something, who knows. But on this side, I think it had rotted down here because the plate goes down in. So we'll fix that. The hood ain't closed, which is why it's not matching, but it's a 50s car. We'll get it close. This door is mint. I'm pretty sure we could sand and shoot that. We're not gonna, but you could. We're probably gonna sand it down to where we get to one of the base, you know, something like primer before metal or something like that. We're probably gonna epoxy, you know, do an epoxy primer, like a sealer, over the whole car. Grind out our bare metal where we can and whatnot, get it to really adhere. But here's the thing, right? So this car probably saw quick and dirty bodywork of the 70s, and again in the 80s, and again in the late 90s. And I say quick and dirty because, look, this car, when it was done back in the 70s, was like worth nothing. They put a couple $100 worth of material and labor into it, right? Because they were worth, that's what everybody did. And people say, well, the old bodywork was really bad. Well, I mean, all the metal is good. They cut out what was bad. This car is still alive. This thing has been driven by the same guy every summer, other than the last couple years, since 1974. So I think it's kind of a cool thing that people did these crude old nasty. Now, look, this thing ain't full of Bondo and newspaper and fly screen. There's no aluminum siding in it. So, like, this is probably a better example because, yeah, you find some stuff that, you know, I found a whole cab corner of a 72 GM truck. And when I took the filler out to see what the metal was like, well, there was never metal because there was newspaper and there was actually sandpaper. And it was those little round sandpapers like I use on my palm sander, stuffed in there, and then they Bondoed over it. I mean, it stuck to the paper well. That paper was like right infused. But this car is actually pretty good. Like, the metal work is actual metal work. I think it's going to be a cool car. So when you find stuff like this, oh no, it's not original, I need a new fender. Look, this car runs and drives and it's awesome. We're going to straighten that out, fix it up. Little epoxy primer, a little bit of filler. You board it out. And again, I'm going to have to do some more videos on sanding. I realize those are boring videos. And originally I thought, oh, those are boring, I'm not going to make those. And every time I make one with a bit of sanding involved, I'm kind of hesitant. But look, the key trick to these cars being nice is how well you can prep it. I'm sure you've heard that 100 times before, and you're thinking, wash it, clean it, prep it, sand it, wash it, clean it. Look, the most important thing, and I don't care if you're painting with super expensive matrix, some kind of cool PPG product, the cheapest walk into Napa Auto Parts, hey, give me your Metal Tech tractor paint, right? If you don't do good body work, it's going to look like hell no matter what you do. I mean, you could roll a layer of trim clad on a car like this, and if the bodywork is good and straight, it'll look like a bad paint job on a really nice car, and most people would forgive it because the car will look better than it is. So even something like this, you could probably put 3 coats of a high build on there and kind of sand it out. But then if you kind of get this going on, so that's all going to have to be filled and boarded out. I figure, like, 95% of this quarter will probably end up being filled and boarded out by the time I'm done. And when I say that, I'm not saying you put 2 gallons of Bondo or filler on the fender and block it. What I'm saying is you fill all the spots, get them semi-straight, flood the whole car with a skim coat, and it gives you something so when you're blocking, you can keep moving back and forth and try to keep it as round as you can. And if you get a couple of waves, it is what it is, but let's hope not, right? The more you do it, the better it is. It's all the shapes that make the colors pop. Now in the case, this one will be satin black, but even so, the curve is off and the sheen hits it. You're gonna see it, right? Because this right here, this little whoop, that right there, look, I mean, hey, why do people like these Chevys? Oh, it's this, it's that, you know. That shape, that could have just been straight, right? Like think of a 51 Ford, straight. But that little dip they put there, like to, especially on this, the Pontiac, it looks like almost like a 50s Cadillac fender, shrunk down. Like it's a sexy look, right? Got all these rounds on the flats, the way the taillights kind of rocket out of the back. And you've got that, you come over the wheel arch and then it turns into a body line and it's swept back. Like this is a nice car, man. This is like a 55 Chevy if you wanted to go next level. Like this is cool. But the only way you're going to pull off all those cool body lines and shapes and the round of the roof, you know, hopefully a color that accentuates all that. I mean, these cars look so good with candy paints and crazy metal flake and metallic because of all these little round shapes. And I mean, don't get overwhelmed if you're trying to do one of these, because you just got to take your time and you'll figure it out. Learn how to block. Some guys say, well, Durablocks are great. And then I've heard other guys say, well, you got to get linear blocks and this block and hard blocks because, you know, they're not good enough for super duper show. Look, I'm talking like you're standing, like right now, I'm about 5 feet away from the front of the car looking down the car. And at a car show, this is what I'd be looking at as I walk by, just as we're doing right now. And if it's slick and I don't see any obvious waves or anything, that's as good as you need it to be. Because when you're looking at it out your window in the driveway, it's got to turn you on. This is your car. If you're worried about the whole world picking on you, you're never going to have a car good enough. And no car is perfect. And every single one of us in this trade can go to a car show and we all pick apart different things. Now, the polite guys just don't say anything. And quite frankly, we've all accepted that they can only be so good because there's only a limited amount of time of money and time you can put into these. And as much as I'd love to turn everything into a crazy Barrett Jackson style $100,000 plus car, real people drive these. And here's the thing. I work on drivers. I don't really do the Autorama SEMA thing. I mean, given the opportunity, look, it's simple. The opportunity is money. You bring me a car and enough money and I'll do that. But I make a pretty good living doing what I do. People drive these. 90% of my customers are blue collar that have owned the car for a while or business owners. How about that? A lot of guys in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. They're all business guys. This car. Guy in his 60s, full-time mechanic, owns his own shop. He's successful. He knows what it cost. This guy, collector, lots of these cars he has, runs a full-time shop by himself, works alone. Older guy, successful. This guy, bought the car when he was young, kept the car his whole life. Blue-collar guy, works hard, semi-retired, now works at a camp. This guy's not a millionaire, but he's done very well. He did have a great job. He's got a nice home. Again, he's not a rich guy, so we're not going to put 50+ thousand into this car. I won't discuss what we'll put into the car, but I can guarantee you it'll be a driver and it'll look great. And the funny thing about that these days is that doesn't seem to change the pricing a whole lot. Now, if you have a 1 of 40 special edition, something or other. That's a whole other thing. You do take that to a different level. But this, to make this mint, would cost more than the car is worth, even if it was super duper mint. Now you can argue that, oh, but if you do a resto mod, they go for crazy money. Well, sometimes they do, especially when they're fresh and new. And a few years later, you see them go across an auction block, and no one talks about when, wow, last time it was 180,000 and this time it sold for 14,000, you know, because 10 years later, maybe the bodywork didn't hold up. Maybe the car was done on a TV show and they did it in 30 days and they just put a team of 19 dudes on it. Look, all this stuff is going to shrink and do things. So, right? So again, does it have to be perfect? Well, here's what I strive for. I strive to be as good as the guy who did this back in the early 70s. And why do I say that? He kind of lapped the metal in a strange way. I wouldn't do that. But that being said, this quarter damage, whatever, it lasted as long as I've been alive. So I see new stuff that fails in 10, 12 years. Well, I use this product, then I use that product, then I sealed it, then I did another coat, and then so look, this thing where you got to use 18,000 products, I think the more stuff you throw at something, the more prone to failure you're going to get. As far as I'm concerned, filler, Bondo, body fill, that. You read the can, it says DTM right on them. Direct to metal. You make this rough, direct to metal. Get it? Some people are saying, well, the 80 swirl could cause little cuts and stuff in the paint finish down the road. I've seen a few videos like that. So they're doing the metal, they run the 80, and you don't sand the hell out of it. You run your 80 a little slow, and the idea is you put cuts in the metal. And I mean, not crazy cuts, but the more tooth, the more bite. And then you can do 180, but you don't want to do past that. Now, some of the guys do 40 and 80 and stop. I think that's probably fine. Now, what I did notice on this car, and this is why it's great to look at this, some of this was done in the 70s. Where it was failing, there is places where the metal was not cut. Someone spun this off with a sander. I don't know what they used, but after this many years, it's hard to tell what was originally used, but the little bit of cut that you can get up close and see in it looks like maybe a 220. So I don't know if they grinded it and then cut it and then sanded it to try to get a lot of bite